All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. We hope to have another valuable session for you tonight. Knowing who we have leading it, I have no doubts on that front. We have Phil Briggs. You all know him pretty well. He is the section director of referee instruction for Section 10. And he's one of those faces I've known my whole referee career, which is also the case for many of you, since you are all from Section 10. I'm not going to say much more, except Phil's got a very strong grasp on the laws, and I'm very much looking forward to him introducing us to what they look like for next year. And we've all been chatting about what soccer will look like next season. So thank you very much, Phil. We appreciate you doing this.
Okay, you're quite welcome. You ready? So how's everybody doing? Good?
Yeah, doing good.
All right. As obviously the topic is are the updates to the laws of the game. I assume most of you have read them by now. So this may or may not be new information for you. But feel free to interrupt and start discussion questions when you see something that's you think needs a little more elaboration. Fair enough? Okay. Hang on. There we go. Okay. The big news, of course, is there's no major changes. I was over on one of the referee blogs called Refereeing World a few days ago, and there was an article there by Kalina. If you remember who PL Kalina was, and his comments were that this is a year for clarification, and so a lot of the changes are intended to clarify, which means they're hoping to make our lives a little easier. There are a number of changes that are addressed with respect to VAR, and I'm basically going to ignore those because I don't know any regions around here that have VAR systems. Anyway, as you know, the laws go into effect June 1st of every year, and I direct you to that link there to the IFAB to find documentation. There you'll find a copy of the current laws of the game, the updated version. You'll also find documents that cover clarification and they address why they did certain things. And we'll be talking a little bit about that tonight because I thought that was kind of interesting. They do it every year. So let's just jump right in. Law 1, the changes to the shape of the goalposts. What I've done to orient you is you see the text in here that's kind of a dark blue starting with 10 goals. What I've done in all cases when we discussed the laws is I've just copied, I actually taken a picture of the law book and put it in place here. So you're actually seeing the actual letter of the law. So I don't have to, I wasn't trying to simplify it or shorten it. And there's really not that many changes, so it's not a big deal. But the big deal about Law 1 is we don't need to worry about it. Our goalposts are what our goalposts are when we hit those fields. And the reality is the change to the law is really directed not at the referees, but to the hosting authority. It's what they have to comply with. As referees, our job is it safe? And is it the right piece of equipment for the game we're doing? Okay, so let's jump into Law 2. They did make a small change regarding the defective ball restart. Basically, in the past, what it said, if a ball became defective, you stop play and you restart with a drop ball at the point at which the ball became defective. Well, that's inconsistent with our current dropped ball procedures from last year. And so they basically have reworded it so we're more consistent with what goes on in Law 8. So anybody have any issue with that? I mean, that's a really simple change. It just says follow Law 8 when you have to do a drop ball.
So Phil, where do we drop the ball?
So if the ball becomes defective in the penalty area, you drop the ball to the goalkeeper.
Okay, so that's what we're clarifying.
If the ball becomes defective outside the penalty area, you drop it and you blow the whistle, you've stopped play, and so you restart just like you would if there was an injury. You find out who was the last person that had possession and drop the ball to that team.
Okay, thank you.
Law 4 goes to, actually there's a lot of changes in Law 4. None of them are addressed at referees. All the change has to do with the wearable technology. I don't know, how many of you watch professional games? Raise your hand. Yeah. You notice that when the players sometimes take their shirt off, you'll see little electronic devices on their back in a harness, a halter kind of harness. The Law 4 change addresses all that. It basically gives, it describes to the competition authority how they have to handle the data from all of this and what they can approve and not approve. So it's really not a referee thing, but it covers the basis for the professional game. If any of you know any regions that are wealthy enough to have performance monitors for their players, please let me know, because I want to go referee there. So for the moment, that's really not applicable for us. Okay, this is where it starts to get more interesting. And there's an interesting backstory on this one too. Law 10 determined the outcome of a match. They're addressing kicks from the penalty mark. And the change is the following. As usual, a player who's been sent off during the match is not permitted to take part. And that leads to the reduce to equate thing that's still in place. The new part is the thing after the semicolon, which says that warnings and cautions issued during the match are not carried forward into kicks from the mark. So that's new. So, and the reason for that is that they've stated that the kicks from the mark really isn't part of the match. It's the way of determining a winner, but it's not really part of the match. Now, when this change showed up in April, you'll notice if you look at the English language on there, they talk about a player sent off is not permitted to take part, semicolon, warnings and cautions issued during the match are not carried forward. The implication there was that addressed players. And their explanation, if any of you read it in April, also only mentioned players. So the reality is that it kind of applies to everybody. It applies to players and team officials for warnings and cautions. And the backstory was kind of interesting because when we first saw that, our friend Chris Doucette sent an email out saying, how exactly do we interpret this? Is this just players? It makes more sense to have it apply to everyone, but is it just players? Because that's all they addressed in their language. And so that got batted around sections 1, 2, 10, and 11 quite a bit. There's quite a lively discussion. Some of you, I know Bob, I think, was part of it. And finally, Alan Lee, who's the SRA from section 2, is Linda's counterpart in section 2, actually emailed the IFAB and asked them. And interestingly enough, David Elleray, if you know who David Elleray is, he's one of the guys that writes these. Responded and said, yeah, team official warnings, and he also meant cautions as well are not carried forward. So I thought that was an interesting backstory from the AYSO perspective. Okay, the other changes on kicks from the mark are also interesting, and it says if the goalkeeper commits an offense and as a result the kick is retaken, goalkeeper is warned first time and then caution for subsequent offenses. Remember, this is at the professional game. Prior to this, you went straight to caution, just so you know, in the professional game. The other part of the change was if both the goalkeeper and kicker commit an offense, at the same time the kick is recorded as missed and only the kicker is cautioned. So I find that kind of interesting. About that. The reason they gave for that was that typically the goalkeeper offense is triggered by a illegal feint on the part of a kicker, and so they're putting the whole blame on the kicker for this. Now, obviously, you understand a referee wrote this, but I thought it was interesting that you only addressed the kicker. The other thing, caveat, remember we're dealing with youth, and we have to be very age appropriate in how we display any discipline, and this is one of those places. Question for y'all: how do we write this up? If we warn and then caution a keeper, how do we write that up? What category does it fall under?
Unsporting behavior.
Is it unsporting behavior, or is it something else?
Well, actually, probably delaying of the game.
No.
Persistent offense.
How about persistent offenses? Remember, Jimmy talked about that a couple weeks ago. You know, they talked about there's not a number in this particular system. They've given you the number. It's 2. A warning, then a caution. So it's interesting. It's actually consistent with what they've done in the past in penalty kicks, and we'll discuss a little bit of that as well later on. So, but the key thing is if they both commit an offense, the key thing for us in kicks from the mark is the kick is recorded as missed. You know, discipline is age specific, but the key part is the kick is recorded as missed. And that's what we need to remember. It's not a retake. And that part of it will impact us. Okay, shifting gear to offside. Apparently there must have been a lot of discussion at the IFAB level about this issue. And remember, they're dealing with the professional game, but they're basically saying a deliberate handball, which is a foul or an offense, the Law 12 offense, is also to be considered a deliberate play for the purpose of judging participation in offside. So it puts it in a very special category. And you have to think about that. And I kind of wonder why they did that. It really wasn't clear from their explanation text why they did that, other than they did. They felt it made sense from the point of view of the spirit of the game. Because deliberate handball is really one of the very severe transgressions you can make. And so what they're saying is that if a player in an offside position receives the ball from an opponent who deliberately plays the ball, including by a deliberate handball, he's not judged to have gained an advantage, with the caveat unless it was a deliberate save. But you're not going to see many deliberate handballs being a deliberate save, I don't think. But it's very interesting, because does everybody understand what they're saying here?
This is basically they're allowing us to play advantage, you know, even if we don't announce, you know, or signal the advantage.
Correct. They're allowing you to play advantage in this particular situation. So you have to weigh, as a referee, you're going to have to weigh, is it more advantageous for me to let play continue, or is it more advantageous to blow the whistle? And there's going to be a whole lot of factors in there that include, is there really a good opportunity for the team to continue the attack, and so on and so forth. What it does, it gives us another little tool we have in our toolbox, and allows us a little more flexibility in our decision making. So I think it's good from that standpoint. Anybody have any comments about that? Any thoughts? Okay. Let's press on a little bit then. The other thing they talked about in there, and I understand this has been a topic of this from Lewis, this has been a topic of discussion among several of you, is they've defined what constitutes the arm. And the only thing I got, when I mentioned earlier, I read the column by Kalina, and the only comment he made there was that now the law has clarified the difference between the shoulder and the arm. And that's really the only guidance I've seen. The reality is, when I look at the picture, I kind of get the sense that if it hits somewhere up near the shoulder joint, even if it's on the outside of the shoulder joint, that's just play on. If it gets down into the arm, into the bicep area, then we've got handling. or potential for handling. Again, this just provides us a little more guidance. I don't know if it helps us a whole lot, but this is what they have, and they have a nice new picture now. They've never shown us a picture before, and so I think it was kind of enlightening that they did that. Anybody have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, it seems to me that it makes a lot of sense because, you know, that part of the arm from the armpit up, that part of the shoulder, can't be moved from the chest cavity, from the chest area. It just cannot. So it can't reach for anything. It can't do anything like that. That the chest can't. So my suspicion is that had part of it. You know, part of the background.
I concur with Bob.
Yeah. Except for people with bionic shoulders, right, Bob?
Yeah, but we don't play anymore.
Yeah.
Or any less.
Yeah. So again, basically, it's going to be your judgment as referees. You're going to have to, as usual, watch closely and make the judgment. But it provides at least a little bit of guidance that they haven't done in the past. Okay, handball. As you might expect, the handball offense has been, I guess the word is clarified at some level, and reworded a little bit. All the elements have stayed the same from last year to this year. It's just been wordsmithed a little bit, and the key point they're trying to make is with respect to the underlined bullet. I'm sorry, at the bullet underneath the underlined bullet. That says after the ball is touched there or a teammate's hand arm, even if accidental, immediately scores or immediately creates a goal scoring opportunity. Last year, the word immediately was missing. And that led to discussions. I had a number of discussions from referees about the following scenario. What happens if a player near midfield, the ball accidentally hits their hand or arm, it goes to their feet, and now they're soloing in 50 yards away towards the goal on an opportunity? Do I blow the whistle or do I not blow the whistle? And those kind of discussions were apparently happening at other places as well. So this is an attempt to address that. Now, what's enlightening is what the IFAB said, how you define immediately. And keep in mind, immediately is the key to this change. What they said was they're attempting to clarify what the spirit of the law is. And the stuff in the blue box is what IFAB has said, and that's a verbatim copy in terms of this change. And they're defining immediately, or what they're defining is, they're not really defining immediately. What they're defining are some examples of what's not immediate. By saying it's not an offense if after an accidental handball, the ball travels some distance. I can't read it here. Hang on. Some distance, or there are several passes, or there's a notable time interval, and they give you some examples. So under this definition, under the question we had last year, the answer would be no, you wouldn't blow the whistle because the player would be running some distance with the ball. So the key is immediately. They're trying to give you some concept of what it means by defining what's not immediate. So what's not immediate are some number of passes or a long pass or distance dribbling the ball. And they don't give you guidance what that really means. But at least there's some thought. It should provide some thought process for you as a referee. Anybody have any thoughts or take on this?
It's a good opportunity for a wait and see, from a referee's perspective. If you observe the ball touching the hand, just wait, see what happens. If a goal scoring opportunity if a goal is scored immediately, you would know right away. If a goal scoring opportunity develops, it would take, another, 1, 2, 3 seconds. So hold the whistle, wait and see.
Yep, that's good advice. Recall the only other advice we have on stuff like that has to do with advantage, where we allow a couple of seconds before we kind of see what happens. Maybe that helps us provide some parameters, but the key thing is, if you have a long pass, you've got to be thinking, maybe I don't need to blow the whistle. If you have several passes, maybe you're thinking I don't have to blow the whistle. Or if the player's a long ways away and having to dribble the ball a long way. So at least there's some guidance this year, which we didn't have last year, which I think is positive. It's very interesting concept. And I was actually expecting this change, because the law last year left, so without that word immediately in there, left a lot of things in a very ambiguous state. And I knew it shouldn't have stayed that way for long.
Yeah, it caused problems with VAR interpretation too.
Yeah. Okay, let's shift on to another part of Law 12. They talk about an illegal second touch by the goalkeeper, and it specifies the sanction. So if the goalkeeper plays the ball, where my screen is. Okay, if the goalkeeper, if the offense is playing the ball a second time after a restart, before it touches another player, the goalkeeper must be sanctioned if the offense stops a promising attack or denies an obvious goal-scoring opportunity or a goal. Again, this is part of the implementation of the DOGSO/SPA, the stopping promising attack flavor that's filtered throughout these parts of the laws. So what they're saying is, if the goalkeeper is handling the ball is playing the ball a second time after a restart, it sort of is indicating that the goalkeeper is the one that initiated the restart. And so what they were looking for were things like, suppose he muffs goal kick out, and an opponent has an opportunity to collect that ball, and obviously he would have a good opportunity to either start an attack or have a goal scoring opportunity, and the keeper picks up the ball or kicks the ball away to prevent that. Then you have to sanction it appropriately with either a caution if it's stopping a promising attack, or with a send off if it's denying an obvious goal scoring opportunity.
Okay, so what would the restart be if he does that in the goal area? Would it be a penalty kick?
Yeah, if he keep in mind, what's the restart for a second touch?
Well, it depends, and if he's in the box or out of the box, I guess.
No, it doesn't. What's
An
the restart for a
IFK.
second touch? It's always an IFK. It's always an IFK.
Okay.
The restart is going to be an IFK in this case. The issue is, and that doesn't give you the latitude then to convert the DOGSO to a caution,
Okay.
because you're not going to be able to award a penalty kick. So,
Right.
so the issue here is you have to look and see what the goalkeeper does. If he has a second touch on the ball, you have to look and see where the opponents were. Did anybody have a chance? You have to see the whole situation and see if he stopped a promising attack or denied an obvious goal scoring opportunity. In which case you have to sanction it as stated. It's part of their attempt to clean up the law to make everything consistent with what they started a couple of years ago with the downgrade of the DOGSO to a caution if you award a penalty kick, and they're trying to cover all their bases here. So just something to be aware of. I don't know that it's a real issue with our youth game. And again, the issue with our youth game is you've got to be age appropriate. So you have to be very careful with the kids out there. Okay, they have a couple, Law 12 has a couple of other things that address this whole thing. When I say DOGSO/SPA, I'm talking about, if you're not familiar with the acronym, everybody should be familiar with DOGSO. SPA is stopping a promising attack. You recall last year, if you could delay, they talked about delaying the restart to show a card, and said, well, gee, if the team wants to take a quick free kick and they have a clear goal scoring opportunity, and you haven't started the disciplinary sanction, you can let that happen and then issue the discipline at the next stoppage. The law last year stopped where it says the sanction is administered at the next stoppage if the offense was denying the opposing team an obvious goal scoring opportunity, the player is cautioned. That's where it stopped last year, which says that if you allowed play to continue and they have a clear goal scoring opportunity, then he hasn't denied the goal scoring opportunity, but he's still going to get cautioned. And so they added the thing after the semicolon, which says if the offense interfered with or stopping a promising attack, the player is not cautioned. So it's a downgrade from what would be cautionable to a not caution, because you recognize that they've been able to maintain their goal scoring opportunity. So it's just a matter of following the logic through and being totally consistent with how you have to play this whole thing. Everybody clear on that?
Sure. My only problem with this one is that let's say you have a player deliberately commit a handling offense just because they're caught out of position, and then you play the advantage. You need to stop that behavior, and it just makes it more difficult to communicate to everybody that that behavior is not acceptable, because you don't want other people imitating that behavior somewhere else in the field. That's all. It'll just take the referees. Requires you to communicate well to everyone.
That's
what
correct.
You've done and why.
Yes, it does. And I would think in that situation, at least a kind of a stern talking to the player, maybe even a little bit public, to make sure everybody around you knows that you don't want that kind of behavior out there. It's a thought anyway. A good comment. Thank you. Hello. Okay. So anyway, the idea, of course, was it makes things logically consistent with what they've done with the DOGSO part of that. Again, the other part has to play with advantage, and it's the same deal. If instead of stopping play and allowing them a quick free kick, you played advantage, it's the same logic you go through. So if it was a DOGSO situation, you played advantage, then it's now a caution. If it's a stopping a promising attack, then you don't caution the player. But again, I would believe the same procedure you'd want to go through is make sure everybody understands that behavior was not acceptable. So they just made things consistent here, whether you stop play or whether you apply advantage under the same sorts of circumstances. Okay, this is just a little tweak. Nobody should be surprised by that. When you write out a caution for failure to respect the required distance, now the drop ball is now part of it. So guess what? All of the AYSO tests to list out caution have now been corrected to account for this. So it's just a simple tweak. It should be obvious because it just provides consistency. And then covering their bases to cover for what they told you a couple charts ago about second touch from goalkeepers is one of the cautions for unsporting behavior is committing any other offense, saying the offense doesn't have to be a foul, which interferes with or stops a promising attack, except for reward a penalty kick, is now subject to a caution for unsporting behavior. Is everybody clear on that? It doesn't have to be a foul to trigger an unsporting behavior caution. So, for example, in the case of the goalkeeper, that's an infraction well, depending on which law it triggered. If it was a goal kick, it's an infraction of the goal kick law, which is 15 or so, 16. Okay. Penalty kick changes, and it changes in a manner that's consistent in many respects with what the kicks from the mark was. It also is responding to changes driven by the VAR. So if the goalkeeper commits an offense during the taking of a penalty kick, if the ball enters the goal, we award a goal. That's not new. If the ball misses the goal or rebounds from the crossbar goalpost, the kick is only retaking if the goalkeeper's offense clearly impacted on the kicker. This is new. If many of you were watching games last year, Women's World Cup, EPL, you were seeing penalty kicks being retaken for what were trifling movements on the part of the goalkeeper for a ball that had no way to go into the goal. And retakes were taken. And this change was in response to that. As usual, if the ball's prevented, then the kick's retaken. Again, similar to the kicks from the mark, warn first and then caution the goalkeeper. Again, I warn you, age appropriate. So is everybody clear on this? That we've always, in our training, have kind of said, hey, you know, if the goalkeeper is stepping off the line and the ball's not going in the goal, most of us understand that the spirit of the law says that we don't do a retake here. Now they've actually made it the letter of the law. So hopefully that'll help out with the VAR stuff. And again, just like with kicks from the mark, if they both commit offenses at the same time, then in this case, we caution the kicker, restart play with an IFK. So you treat it just as if the kicker only had committed an infraction. And you can see in the red what their rationale was for this. Now that pretty much concludes most of the changes that happened to the law, but there are other changes that show up in the law book that I thought were kind of interesting, and we'll talk about a couple of those. First, here's I'm not going to go through this. Just to let you know, the summary table has been updated to show this in Law 14. Read it at your leisure. Okay, y'all are familiar. There's a glossary in the law book. It's been there for a few years now, and for the first time, they actually have a definition or a comment under holding offense that you can read. And what's interesting is they're saying it occurs only when the contact impedes the opponent's movement. So what they're saying is a certain level of holding is acceptable. Now, we've always known about that from our concept of, you know, trifling that we talk about, a trifling concept. But they're kind of bringing this to the forefront when they're saying very specifically, you have to look for something that impedes the opponent's movement, not just a grab on the shirt, but does it impede the opponent? And this was their rationale they wrote in their text, that football does not expect minor holding to be penalized. So I thought that was enlightening that they've codified that finally. And you know, most of you experienced referees I've seen out there are that's what you do. You look for what's important, and what's important usually is that it interfere with the opponent, and in which case then we get the opportunity to blow the whistle. Now there's another part of the glossary that changed as well, and that's the restart position, and you can read that as well as I can. Basically, they're just saying that the position of a player at a restart is determined by where they're standing, or if a part of their body is on the ground, where their body is on the ground, except for Law 11. Apparently, there were some VAR issues last year that had to do on penalty kicks, where players were actually feet were outside the penalty area, but they were leaning forward with their heads and upper body over the penalty area line, which technically puts them inside the penalty area. And I think we're getting guidance here from the IFAB for the VAR folks to don't be so anal. Watch the feet. So again, not really an issue for us. The other thing is we've got new guidance on standard mechanics. In the past, on a PK, the AR's responsibility if the goalkeeper moved off the goal line was to raise his flag, which a lot of referees felt was way too obvious a signal and didn't give them any wiggle room. And they're right, at least in my opinion. Now what the guidance is what does the pregame from the referee tell you to do? Do that, which I think is really great, because most of the experienced referees I know were doing that anyway. But you would watch in professional games, particularly those that were done like at a World Cup, where they're expected to follow the guide, and you saw a lot of flags being popped up on PK movement, goalkeeper movement and PKs. So does everybody feel good about that one? Okay. Okay, that said, just the final words. I highly recommend you go over to the IFAB website and download the documents and take a look at what's there. I will tell you right now, they do have a presentation up for the law clarifications that I went through, and there are some videos embedded in there that are interesting to see, that kind of show you the obvious. But it's worthwhile going to look at them. The other thing is, for those of you that don't have the iPhone app or the phone app from IFAB, I recommend getting it because it's useful. I use it all the time. It's very useful. One last pitch here. We have some new documents that are available to referees. We have the updated NRP manual. We have the updated referee instructor resource book, which several of us had the opportunity to contribute to recently. And we also have the updated referee guideline. I point your picture to the cover of the referee guideline. That's a Section 10 referee crew. You may actually know some of those folks there. If you don't know them, if you can't tell who they are, from the left, it's Jeremy Mueller, who's from Area D. Greta Robbins, who's from Q. She was the referee on the match. The ugly guy in the middle is me. I was the fourth official. And you probably all know the young, handsome AR on the right side of the page. That's Victor. This was taken at the Western State Games last year. Apparently, it was Section 10's turn to occupy the cover, so Linda decided that was the appropriate picture. But anyway, I'd recommend you take advantage of all these manuals. Particularly the referee guideline is a useful thing to hand out to your regional to referees within all the regions. Not necessarily your regional referees, but the referees within the regions may benefit from that book. All of them are available at aysovolunteers.org at no cost to anyone. If you want printed versions, that's a different story, but the electronic versions are downloadable. That said, thank you guys. I hope this kind of clarified things in your minds about the law updates. I hope to see you on the field soon. Fingers crossed, and hopefully everybody will stay safe. Back over to Lewis.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
Hey, Phil, I have a question on the last change of Law 12, the caution for unsporting behavior. There we go. So we were talking about fouls, and then you went on to talk about the glossary. Fouls are no longer listed in Law 12, and the glossary doesn't define fouls. So if I were a new referee coming into this and didn't have a memory of what a foul is, I know this is an odd concept, how would I define foul?
That's a really, really good question. You know, the Law 12 itself actually is fouls and misconduct still, but that's the only place the foul shows up. They refer to offenses now, and the the actual explanation for this particular change did say that the unsporting behavior can happen for offenses other than fouls. That was actually in the explanation. So it's a really good question. It's something we have to kind of really think about. And when I talk to, and I'm trying to train myself not to use the word foul, to try to use the word offense. But I've been doing this a long time, so it's a hard habit to overcome. And I'm not sure what a good answer for you is, Lewis. But it's something we need to think about. Because even at the highest level, they still think about fouls because I'm reading it in their words. So.
Hey, Lewis, if I had a new referee ask me, I would tell him to look in the glossary under offense.
Okay.
I didn't find that.
I like it. Yeah.
Yes.
It's just an interesting.
Yeah.
They pulled it out of Law 12. They pulled it out of the definitions of what are the offenses now, the indirect free kick, the direct free kick offenses. But that seems to be the main place they removed it. They did not do a full purge.
Correct.
Obviously, since Law 12 is still called fouls and misconduct.
Right. So I wish I had better guidance for you on that, but I think you have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. A good
Thank
question.
you very much.
Any other questions?
I have one. I think about the Law 10 issue with the resetting of the cautions. If we go to kicks from the mark, thinking from a tournament perspective, a player could get 2 yellows in terms of point deductions or disqualification for accumulation from a tournament, but not necessarily from that game.
Probably depends on tournament rules. Certainly, the potential exists for a player to get a caution during the regular match and get another caution during kicks from the mark. I agree with that. So tournament rules may have to address how you handle that. From the referee standpoint, you're not going to send him, but you're not going to send him off for that.
One of the things, though, is generally speaking in tournaments that I've seen, kicks from the mark are not used until you get to knockout rounds.
Right. That's why. Yeah. That's
So
why.
there's no points involved anymore.
Didn't think of it in a season context, but if you had a tournament rule that a player that gets 2 yellows misses the next game, and that continues into the knockout rounds, they could get 2 yellows in one game and not be sent off, but also not allowed to play in the next knockout if their team progresses. Unlikely, but I'm sure it would happen in my tournament. And
yeah. It's something, I think what that says that we need to make the tournament directors or whoever's providing the rules for the tournament aware of these sorts of changes. Okay, Lewis.
All right. If that's it, thank you very much, Phil.
Phil.
Before I lose anybody, I have an idea. We're going to push through a little more. I know Phil's section wrapped up quickly, and so I just wanted to throw that in before we lose anybody. Thank you very much, Phil. It's always good to have Claire Sage input on these. So we appreciate that and the work you did. For those of you who don't get to see the things behind the scenes, Keith Roberts doesn't have his audio working, but he says, thank you, Phil. Phil was he set the record for being the earliest to be prepared for these sessions. He was set a couple of weeks ago. Furthermore, he was one person shy of tying the record for attendance this year. It's great to see who turned out. It's been fun. And because of who turned out, Matt Almaraz also says, thank you, Phil. Because of who turned out and the reality that we're all facing right now, I'm going to throw a couple of people on the spot right now. I think they're equipped for it. I was prompted. It looks like there was a private chat going on that accidentally bubbled over into public in the chat on this meeting. And I say, well, how about we all talk about this reality? So the reality is, what I saw is John Furness brought this up. John Furness, the regional referee administrator for Ojai, region 147. Yeah, so let me take back screen sharing here. So we had some chat before everything went online about what to do, what the return to play looks like. And I know particularly equipped to discuss this is Cindy Elliott, and we also have some others that have been attending section staff meetings, area staff meetings, and regional staff meetings. So for those of you who, well, let's do this. Let's throw out the questions first, and then we'll see who can answer them. So I know the question I saw typed up was how do we have a safe return to play with this context? So that's one question we're going to put together. Let me just make a list of questions here.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. This is John Furness. Sorry, my video is not working. And sorry if everyone thought we were going to get out early. Cheers, Phil, for being so thorough with that. I just think, yeah, like looking at things like what's happened in the professional game, I know that we, of course, can't have all those amazingly different setups and the modern technology, but on even a basic level, what things do people feel like they can implement, or how you guys see a season potentially looking like for next season? Like, I know the guidelines are there, but the guidelines are still really quite basic. Like, kids just no spitting. Great. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know if I'm just kind of trying to figure out. So when I come to our board and the board like scratching their heads, I'm like, well, this is possible if we have this amount of manpower for a full season.
Yeah, that's a fair question, John. Does anyone else have any questions to throw? I want to throw out a few at the start, and then we'll start answering them. I'm sure that'll bring up others. I'll put this one up for myself. I know that's going to be difficult.
I got one.
All right. Go ahead, Tim.
This is more or less aimed at Phil, because he's the highest section staff there, I think. And that is, can we all get a clarification on what we're going to do about Zoom meetings or to teach the basic referee class, and what the guidelines are or might be for training new people? The assumption is crowded classrooms are not going to be an option. Yep, thanks.
Good question. Good question. Thank you. I like that one.
How do we manage social distancing on the touchline?
Oh, I may have bitten off more than I can chew here. I'm watching the clock. Any more questions?
I'm just having a problem that we've discussed this on Saturdays, and that your board hasn't contacted anybody that's involved in this yet.
Can you rephrase that question for me, Kristen?
Well, Saturdays have our Team W meetings. We've discussed all this, and your board was supposed to have contacted everybody with a list of things that we're doing.
Whose board is this?
Like the region boards.
Okay, so this is not really, this is a concern, not a question.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'm looking at what we got here, and I know number 3 is directed at Phil, but Cindy, how would you feel if I put you on the spot to address these in one fell swoop?
Okay, I'll try to. You guys from W might not know, but we've been having meetings on Saturdays with all the regions to discuss some of these topics. And also, AYSO earlier this week updated their guidance, and I put a link in the chat, and it now includes specific information for referees, which is nice to see. And even better, U.S. Soccer several weeks ago released a very detailed plan on how players should be returning to play. It doesn't address referees, but it does address players. So given that setup, if you show me the list again, Louis, I will try to address some of the questions, at least as we have addressed them in W from our discussion. One, the most fundamental answer to number 1, it is the responsibility of each player and volunteer to not show up for an event if they have any symptoms of COVID, and to follow all of the guidelines that the region has established. To me, that's the answer to number 1. How do I run with a mask? AYSO guidance on that came out earlier this week states that the referee, they call it the center referee, but I'm going to call it the referee, is not required to wear a mask. The assistant referees are encouraged to wear a mask unless it impacts their ability to run. In W in particular, we are taking the approach that regions are going to realign their fields to allow enough space between fields so that there is social distancing, or I'm going to call it physical distancing, from the touchline. And so that should help address that question in case, in cases of the assistant referee. So they will not have spectators right on top of them. There will be a marked out restraining line, and all spectators, coaches, will be behind that line. Which other one? Okay, I kind of addressed 4 at the same time. I jumped to 4. If I was supposed to address 5, our area director, Ruben, has been asking very directly all regions to start communicating very clearly with all participants from last year and all volunteers and players from last year so that they're aware of what's going on. I know in my region, Fillmore, we have gotten some very good, clear communications. There are quite a few templates and resources that AYSO National has made available to make it easier for regions to do this. Regions' websites have very good information, although it's not a push system, but quite a few regions have done this. So hopefully by encouraging the regional commissioners to have this happen, we can make sure the information gets out there. And AYSO has made several resources available to make that happen. Was that quick enough or too quick?
It was quick enough for me. Anyone who had the questions, please speak up if you'd like more clarity. I would like to point out, so that the first resource that Cindy mentioned from AYSO, that she put the link in the chat. I'll go ahead and put it there again. It's right here. Now, as for the U.S. Soccer The Play On initiative. We can see an overview. They have a letter and resources here, guides.
And they have detailed, there are 4 phases and actually a phase 0. There's really 5 phases, and they have completely detailed out the first phase. And it's very well written, very, very long and in depth, but I think it addresses a lot of the questions that I had in my mind. It's mainly directed at coaches and how to conduct training. It did not address phase 2 and phase 3 will go into game situations, but phase 1 addresses how to conduct a training session in a safe manner. So I guess that's not, it was interesting to me as a coach, but it doesn't provide information for referees.
Thank you, and that's in the chat as well now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Cindy. I hope that helps everybody out. Good resources there. And one key thing that I took away from those 5 phases that U.S. Soccer put out is they're not dated. They're depending on specific conditions of the public health situation. So they are ready for sliding, depending on how long it takes for the public health situation to be an acceptable environment for this kind of recreation. Thank you, Cindy. And then I will throw to Phil, if you don't mind, on item 3 here.
Okay. Excuse me. The NRC, Linda, the National Referee Council, and Linda are about ready to roll out a complete online version of the companion class. Remember, we have the online referee training, and it's usually followed up by an in-person class called the companion class. AYSO is about to roll out an online version of the companion class, so that all the training, so they have an option to do all of your training online from all the way through the certification process for the regional referee. The other options to do socially distanced learning would be to, for example, run the online video, have an in-person companion class, but limit it to small groups, which may mean a lot of instructors, and take maximum advantage of your outside spaces. So those are the kind of logical options you have, but the key thing is that we're about ready to roll out a complete online training course.
Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, and if you all will permit me to toot the Team3 horn here for a couple minutes. I don't know to what extent they were used, but some videos were collected from Team3 for that online companion course. I'm looking forward to seeing. I may go take the online companion course just to see where those videos landed. Some of you, those of you who were in the videos, were contacted and asked for your permission and whatnot. So that's been good. What else can happen? There are the alternative options to keep the learning going, keep the volunteers engaged. You will all have noticed that we ramped up our frequency of training as we lost the ability to train in person. We being Team3, so we started going to 2 months, two each month, and these are recorded, and they're put on our YouTube page. That link comes out frequently. If anybody wants it and can't find it, you can go ahead and email us, and we will gladly send it out as we do with regularity. And additionally, we have the Play of the Fortnight resource, which Chris Doucette, who was mentioned in discussion on the changes to Law 10 earlier, and he is on the Section 10 referee staff as well. He's done a great job of writing that play, the Fortnite series. So it's an easy educational thing out there. You can send it as a PDF. And again, it links to our YouTube channel where those play of the Fortnite highlight videos are available for viewing. So there are alternative options to keep folks engaged, and it's been fantastic having all of you show up. I really like the traction that we've had with Team3, and hope to keep. There's been some momentum building, even though it might be somewhat delayed at this point. We got one weekend of tournament this year, but some folks are bringing some great ideas to the program. I'm hopeful for, should there be a fall season, there were discussions of introducing a program in the fall. We'll see how well that works out, or if it'll be possible, or we'll wait till the fall of 2021 to see how things go. So yeah, I really do appreciate everyone attending and showing that maybe we're doing something valuable, trying to make this training available online for those of you who want to stay engaged, and maybe for some people who need something to stay engaged to, those of us who aren't working and caring for extra kids at home or extra time with kids at home and whatnot. Yeah, thank you very much. So with that, I do want to end this session, and again, thanks very much to Phil for educating us again, sharing his wisdom, and Cindy as well for being tolerant, being put on the spot with those questions. Yeah, that was great. So that being said, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you not in 2 weeks, but in 3 weeks. Enjoy your holiday, 4th of July holiday, however you may do that. But in 3 weeks, we will have Cindy leading a session called "Why Am I Here?" And hopefully at the end of it, you are not asking yourself that. So thank you very much, everybody.